You've been rolling around, shouldn't roll it up. Let her roll it up. Break it down like a punch, she would never us. She would never us. That's the real on the real, are you serious? How you feel, how you feel? Used to trip off that shit I was kicking to you. Had some fun on the round, though I'll give it to you. But baby,
Stitch this video and tell me, who's one stranger you still remember?
When I was 8 years old, I got on a plane from Korea and came to America by myself. It was my first time ever being on a plane. I didn't speak a word of English. I was going to be reunited with my parents who had already immigrated to the US. I remember I was seated next to this lady with a baby. I think she tried to talk to me, but I had never met a white person before in my life, so I was just shocked. And she tried to speak to me in English, and I didn't understand any of it, so I just stayed silent. Then the food came out, and it was like nothing I had ever seen before. I think it was like chicken Alfredo, and I just stared at it. I think she knew I was confused, and she leaned over and just cut up the chicken pieces for me. I don't remember what she looked like, but I always think about her from time to time and her act of kindness.
Stitch this video and tell me, who's one stranger you still remember?
In the early 2000s, I was managing a French restaurant in Los Angeles, and a woman walked in and told me that she was celebrating her 109th birthday. When I noticed she was eating alone, I asked her if I could join her, and she graciously agreed. She was lovely, and she told me all kinds of stories, and so, of course, I asked her, what's the secret to a long life? And she looked into my eyes as though she were just peering into my soul, and she said, my lovely dear, you have to let things pass through you, whether it's people or places or things or situations. You must let it pass through you, because when it gets stuck, you get sick. So you must let it all pass through. And I've never forgotten that, and I teach my kids the same because I think she's right. We must let things pass through us.
Stitch this video and tell me, who's one stranger you still remember?
The only name that I knew that they went by was Coochie. Coochie was a gay black man / black trans woman. I'm not sure. I was only 8 years old. Anyway, I was skating with friends in McKay Park in Inglewood, New Jersey, and one of my shoelaces came undone and wrapped around the wheel, and I fell face forward. I got fucked up. Half my friends were still skating. They didn't even know I fell. The other half just laughed and kept going. The other adults in the park just kind of looked at me. You know what I mean? And I was hurt. Like, I was out of breath. I got the wind knocked out of me. Someone came over and said, "Are you okay?" I looked up, and it was Coochie. Everybody avoided them. Said they had diseases, said they were disgusting. Coochie lifted me up off the floor, sat me on a bench, and undid my lace. The only one that cared.
Stitch this video and tell me, who's one stranger you still remember?
Hi everybody, Nana here. I was about 9 or 10, and it was in my backyard, and I'd gone to the far side of the backyard, and there was a tree there, and I was sitting under the tree, and I was crying. And one of the neighbors from the back came over. There was a fence. I remember there was a fence. And she said, "Can you stand up?" And I said, "Yes." And I stood up, and she took my hand through the fence, and she looked me in the eye, and she said, "I want you to know, none of this is your fault. Your mother is mentally ill. You've done nothing wrong." I've always remembered that. She knew what was going on.
Stitch this video and tell me, who's one stranger you still remember?
So 20 years ago, I still talk about this stranger. I met this man I never knew. I was homeless, lived under a bridge, and I lived in this tunnel where he was walking under the bridge when he fell because he was a stumbling drunk, right? So I was talking to him. He was just laughing it up. Like, he was a very good older man. And we got to talking. He found out my situation, and he didn't judge me. 2 days later, he brought me a taco. And once a week for 8 months, he brought me a breakfast taco. And that breakfast taco that he would sit and eat with me made me feel like I mattered, that I was a person. I was a person that mattered enough to this man, and that gave me hope. And when I ended up getting another job and getting my own house, I would always think, does he still look for me?
Stitch this video and tell me who's one stranger you still remember.
I was a third-year student at university. I did not have enough money to buy books, enough money to buy textbooks, enough money to get by as a student. And I was in the deepest pit of depression. I had just lost my grandmother, who was the only source of both financial and emotional support to me. That day, I decided to drop out and look for employment. I collected all my stuff, and I had to go and say goodbye to my friend. Obviously, I was not going to tell him that I was dropping out. On my way to his room, I met a middle-aged white man. He initiated a conversation, and the conversation led to the fact that I was a poor student, and it further led to the fact that I did not have enough money to study that year and that I was going to go and look for employment. And he asked me, how much do you need? And that was a very difficult question because I was owing the university about 3,500 rands, and I needed to buy, books and stuff. And I thought, okay, maybe that would amount to 5,000 rands. I said, no, I would need about 5,000 rands to be okay. He went into the boot of his car, and he wrote on his check 5,000 rands. He handed it over to me. He got into his Toyota Cressida and he left, drove off like that. When I looked into the check, his name was David Mitchell. And I looked for him everywhere, could not find him. Looked for him in the telephone books, could not find him. And that is the stranger that I would always remember in my life.
Stitch this video and tell me who's one stranger you still remember.
Okay, so 2 years ago, I had a friend trick me into taking me to a nude spa. It was super weird and just made me uncomfortable the entire time. But we went into the hot tub and there was a woman already there. She was a bit older and I could kind of tell she was a bit wiser as well. So I started talking to her and I told her about this friend who had been dating a guy for like 6 years and he just would not propose to her. And she told me, when a man is committed, any hurdle that pops up is just another problem to solve. When a man is not committed, any hurdle that pops up is another reason to stay uncommitted. And I just like that because it's so true. Someone who is not committed to you will always look for excuses to stay uncommitted to you. Someone who is committed to you will go out of their way to solve those problems with you because you are a priority. And I just like that. Mind you, we were talking about all of this completely naked. But it always resonated with me and I always think about that advice because it was some of the best advice I ever got in my life.
Stitch this video and tell me who's one stranger you still remember.
In 2016, on New Year's Eve, I was in Louisville, Kentucky, and I was living in my camper at the time. And as always, at the evening, I'd go to Walmart and park there for the night because they let you. But because it was New Year, I didn't want to spend the whole night alone, so I went to Waffle House, which is a chain not necessarily known for its good, clean food, but some of us love the place. A minute after sitting down, there was a loud metal screech from outside and then a crash. I went out to see what was going on and it was a car accident. And as I always had my camera on me, I took a few pictures and then went back inside. The waitress had given my seat to other people. I hadn't ordered yet. It was a man in a cowboy hat and a woman who seemed drunk. It was New Year's after all. I was seated somewhere else. And these two were loud, and the man kept eating his steak with his hand, and maybe because I wasn't too pleased to be by myself on the holidays, I kept shooting dirty looks in their direction, hoping that they'd quiet down, but they didn't. After they finished eating and were ready to go, the cowboy hopped off his stool, and that's when I noticed that he was missing his left arm, which is why he was eating the steak with his hand. I felt like a complete jerk, a total a-hole. And after I was done eating and was ready to go, I asked for the check and the waitress came in and told me that it was taken care of. The man in the hat had paid my check and asked the waitress to wish me a happy new year and that hopefully the next year would be better. This random act of kindness by a stranger toward a person who at the time was not deserving of that kindness always comes to mind. And if that man ever comes across this video, well, thank you, sir.
Stitch this video and tell me who's one stranger you still remember.
25 years ago, I was coming out of a terrible breakup, real bad, and I decided to hitchhike from San Diego to La Paz, Baja California. Halfway there, it got real dark, and I found a home, a little adobe home. I knocked, and a couple opened. I told them what was going on and offered money if I can stay inside their house. They took me in, they fed me. I ended up staying with them the entire 3 weeks. We would go fishing every morning, and they helped me heal. When I left, I gave them all my clothes, I gave them money, and they gave me him and said that he would forever protect me. And wherever I go, he goes. So I'm still friends with the boys. He passed away, the man passed away, and I'm still friends with the boys. They're all married. And yeah, that's a stranger I'll never forget.
This bitch gonna make me